So what we're doing today, by the way, is a continuation of what we did last week. We did a little presentation on the world of cybercrime and what happened in the last year. And I guess I can do a quick recap before we jump into all of the fun stuff. And then I'm going to finish up all the content we didn't get to last week as like a wrap up of what's going on in the world of cybercrime. And then after that, John and I will take questions from the chat, and I will ask John many questions if the chat doesn't have questions, because John knows a lot of things. I don't know if you guys know this.
Not true.
But John knows a lot about a lot of things. All I know about is what I'm talking about here. But there's many angles to cybercrime that are shockingly not just what cybercriminals are doing that can be very interesting. He hacks and he knows things. John of all trades. That's funny. That is officially a funny thing to say.
Well, thank you for letting me join the party here, Nick.
Yeah, dude, it's an honor to have you. For those of you who don't know John, can you introduce yourself? Which again, you're most likely here because you know who John is, not because of any other reason. So just in the unbelievably rare event that someone has not heard of you, who are you?
Hey, hi, hello. My name is John Hammond. I'm a security researcher person who works at Huntress for the day job. And then I have a silly YouTube channel where I share a whole lot of videos on cybersecurity stuff. Trying to be on keyboard, trying to talk and not just talk, but actually walk the walk, trying to do the stuff, trying to actually do some show and tell, do some demos, to have folks see what it all looks like for real and not just ramble and yap. Though I do a lot of yapping and rambling in my videos. So, but super happy to be here with y'all. Thank you for letting me join the party. Last week we did this show over on my Discord server, and we thought this would be kind of a cool way to not cross-pollinate is not the right word, but I guess the closest to it to like, hey, get the party together in two different ways, two different places, which was super sweet.
Yeah, we suspect if you're in here, you're interested in cybercrime, not committing cybercrime, but what's going on in cybercrime. And if you're in John Hammond's audience, that is most likely the same. In case you're not following him, jh.live/links is where you can find all of his stuff. But without further ado, I'm going to start presenting. I'm going to give you guys a quick wrap up of what we talked about in the last event in case you weren't there. And then we will cover some new stuff and then do some Q&A. So what happened in 2025? A lot of things happened. One is many youth hacker collectives became significantly more prominent than they were in years past. However, they were still very prominent in years past. The other thing that was very interesting is breach impact. So like the fallout of a data breach was not quite as isolated as it may have been in years past. The impacts of a breach typically, like in some of the largest breaches we saw in 25 and like the tail end of 2024, were like the company that was hacked and their data that was leaked on like what would have been for a lot of the year breach forums and a lot of the end of last year breach forums. A lot of that data did not actually affect the company that was hacked, but rather affected the many people who use their service or rent servers from them or use their software or whatever. It was like the actual victims were mostly downstream. There were leaks of vendors' configs for tons and tons of customers. There were leaks of code from tons and tons of customers. There were of the like parent company that was hacked. So that was interesting. We started to see a lot more people get compromised and have their data leaked who serve many organizations. This is something that Waifu Connor Muka, who's now in jail for hacking Snowflake and a bunch of Snowflake tenants, a bunch of people who use Snowflake, not actually the company of Snowflakes. He specifically said that they target these kinds of companies. There's like several acronyms for them, but basically business, process, and service companies are who they go after, which they went after during the Snowflake campaign, went after one that successfully got Shiny Hunters, which was his, he said he was a part of Shiny Hunters and Scattered Spider, so got them into whatever they got into, and then they also hacked many of the tenants directly. So kind of an interesting macro look at things. The other is free leaks are slowing down. This is partially because of the decline of some of the more prominent forums. As an example, breach forums as of right now is not the old breach forums is just not alive. There are probably still clones around that have a few members, a few hundred members. There are forums trying to take its place that have not yet succeeded. Yes, Leakbase is a popular one right now. There's a few others, but the like free advertised leaks that like in 2023 and 2024, every single freaking news story was a leak posted to breach forums or something else. And in the last year, that was not the case. Like under the hood of every story was XYZ threat actor posted to breach forums, XYZ threat actor posted to a dark web forum, and the data was free. They just gave the data for street cred. That was not so much the case this year. A lot of the kids who did that ponied up into larger groups and started posting on data leak sites where they post free sample file, which they also used to do in breach forums, but mostly they're monetizing the data that they stole, which is a part of these all play into each other, the rise of extortion crews this year, and then the decline of forums, blah, blah, blah. And also arrests. I'm not going to go over all the arrests again, but we went over so many of them last week. That's probably why we took so much time. And again, one of the big changes in the last year, which is shocking that this number is rising, but the amount of attacks in general, this is a recent Microsoft report. This is covered in Verizon's DBIR from this year. The amount of attacks where the bad guy literally just logged in or took over a valid session is higher than it used to be, despite ATO heuristics tools being more advanced than they used to be to detect a session being taken over. The volume of attempts is so much higher, and the circulation of creds and cookies is so much higher that the number itself has also risen, which is shocking. Now, we covered the rise and fall because everyone involved in these things has pretty much gone. Everyone prominent involved in these things is now in jail, but many things happened in the last year. Breach forums changed ownership. I did a little history recap of it, and two huge forums were seized. That's nulled and cracked. So this is a fun graphic that illustrates the forum landscape. This is a slide I made 2 years ago where, with the exception of raid forums, all of these forums were alive. Now, pretty much all of the prominent English-speaking forums, nulled, cracked, which this may shock some, but nulled and cracked had way more members than breach forums, despite being in the news significantly less. Nulled and cracked were super, super prominent forums. I don't know how many of those members were bots, but they had a ton of members. And now breach forums, nulled, cracked, and raid forums no longer exist. Of course, raid forums doesn't, right? It's like the breach forums is its successor, but still interesting. Places like Exploit and Ramp that are still alive have much smaller member bases and they're kind of more serious places for cybercrime and that. You could make a distinction between threat actors and cyber criminals. Some people do, maybe a cyber criminal is a type of threat actor. Ramp and Exploit and some of the more serious Russian speaking forums, I call those guys threat actors. They're they know how to hack things. When John makes videos dissecting interesting malware or showing UAC bypass, that's threat actor stuff. Cyber criminals are copying and pasting creds, and they're hanging out in seedier places or easier to get to places. There are many people who graduate from breach forums into a place like Ramp or a place like Exploit once they're serious. And yeah, you have to pay for an account. Sometimes you also have to vouch depending on what the rules are at the moment. Someone has to vouch for you in order for you to get membership. They sometimes open up, sometimes lock things down on these forums. And it's a whole different ballgame. But the easy to go to places, which were Telegram and breach forums to meet other cyber criminals, join cybercrime Telegram channels and get involved in that world, have kind of now become just a scattered world of Telegram channels and, a handful of forums again, but no forum I don't want to say there's a clear leader quite yet. In the history of forums, other forums that started with another topic were often a funnel into another. So raid forums was for raiding Twitch streamers. OG users was for finding OG accounts. When someone says you have an OG username, that's your name on Instagram is Nick. You have the Nick, your account is a word or a phrase or a name. It's an impressive username to get because it's a very small amount of characters. It's of course someone would get that in the first day of a service being up. Leaked CX was for music. Minecraft forum was for Minecraft. But a lot of those kids hacked each other in Minecraft, learned how to hack, and shockingly, Minecraft hardcore factions was for many years a big funnel into the world of cybercrime. A lot of those cyber criminals are in jail, but breach forums leads to other places. People doing, sketchy marketing stuff, people doing lower level hacking stuff, people being in terminally online forums, and then people finding Telegram channels to have fun. And then sometimes people getting more serious, joining extortion groups, starting extortion groups, becoming ransomware affiliates, and then they usually hop off platform and go somewhere where more serious people are talking. There were many law enforcement operations. We don't have time for them. Tons and tons of people got arrested, blah, 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 blah. I think in our map of arrests this year, there were 27 very prominent arrests. nests of cyber criminals in the like young English speaking extortion group world, which, is so much more than years before. And then another interesting thing we saw this year was sessions. So session cookies, session tokens became uniquely in the sights of cyber criminals because taking over a session bypasses MFA. It's typically the value of a session is as simple as that. You can attempt to log into something, but a lot more things have MFA on now, and MFA is very effective at stopping someone from logging in, bar, a handful of threat actors who are very dedicated to getting past these things. These things are very helpful. Session tokens walk right by it, walk right by MFA because they're already authenticated. And why? I'm rushing through this to get to the new stuff. This is all stuff we covered last week, by the way. You literally just visit a website. Odds are it's throwing some cookie on your host. When you log into that website, a session cookie is often added to that list of cookies. And then that's why when you open your laptop again 6 months later and go to, website.com, you're still logged in. That's because your session hasn't expired. You don't have to log in every time as long as that session is stored on your computer. And that's literally stored in a file on your computer. So if a cyber criminal steals that file, they have your cookies. And InfoStealer malware obviously steals cookies. It's like one of the two most important things it steals, cookies and creds. So you visit a website and it slaps a couple cookies on your machine. Let's say dark mode, light mode switch, and a visitor ID. Like what number visitor are you on this website? You log in successfully and it adds a new cookie to that cookie file and says, hey, now on website.com, you've got a session token. You already logged in. You don't need to log in again for a while. And then when you do log back in, nothing new happens. It's just still checking your session token. Eventually, your session token will run out and it'll ask you to log in. Session hijacking is when malware infects the machine or something runs, some script is able to execute locally on the machine and literally just grabs that cookie. In the world of InfoStealer malware, usually ships it off to some Telegram channel somewhere, or someone reposts it to a Telegram channel later, after downloading it from their own C2. A guy downloads it and literally just uploads it to his browser. It is unfortunately that simple in many cases. And then the attacker boots it up. And even if they change something, which we've seen on many services that ATOs have happened on, even if something does change in their footprint, oftentimes if the session token is valid, the session will still be permitted. It's a crazy, crazy world, cookies, but it's also important to remember most cookies don't mean anything, right? To a bad guy. This cookie that's, tracking someone's consent to have cookies tracked in their browser. To a cyber criminal, this is extremely interesting. This cookie, ESTS auth persistent, is a well-documented means of reissuing basically auth. Stealing this cookie means you can also bypass MFA and log yourself into someone's session, bar a couple, steps in between there. And bad guys know this. So this guy was selling access on a forum. This might have been Ramp. And he said, let's be clear, there's no 0 day here. This is just a session hijack. I have a rat on a senior exec's machine. Here's all the information about the access. This guy said, to be honest, I've been sitting on a stolen cookie for half a year now from Stealth. Is this a bad joke? Like it still hasn't expired? This person was saying, is it really that easy to bypass 2FA with a simple stolen session cookie? And replied, yes, stealing a session cookie can easily bypass 2FA, which is true. You're logging into an already unlocked session. Does stolen session work if it has 2FA? This person replies, yes, session theft is a way to bypass 2FA. I see it at work a lot, a good bit. Interesting that they're talking about work in here. This person said pivoting from a stolen session to DevOps access is closer than you think. And this is very common in the world of cybercrime now. People giving away cookies, people offering cookies for their channel. And, because in a stealer log, you don't have to save credentials to your browser. InfoStealer malware will steal credentials from the browser's password manager. Cookies are not optional. Those are going to be on the device unless they're cleared diligently, which is not common in most stealer logs. These logs are sold on the internet. We all know this, what bad guys are doing. This was a fun one. I went over a video we have, which John might put in a video of his own at some point. But this was a cool video. I'm going to do screenshots so we can go faster, of a cyber criminal taking over a stolen session. I did this in the cookie training too. So this is you may be seeing this for the second time if you attended our stolen session training. But basically, cyber criminals, this is how easy it is to steal a session. You go into your stealer log and open the user info file, the system info file, the whatever it's called, that has all of the information about the infected machine. And then you go into an anti-detect browser, which is basically like a little virtualization platform for a browser. You can make a bunch of with a unique hardware profile, unique connection footprint, a unique everything. And they just copy and paste the config of the stolen device into the anti-detect browser so it looks exactly like the device they infected. So this one has 4 cores. They update the core count to 4 cores. This one has GTX 1050. They update the graphics card to a GTX 1050. And it's accessing the internet when it was infected with an infostealer malware from Concord, New Hampshire. Now, this person goes into their, the cyber criminal goes into their proxy config for their anti-detect browser and searches up Concord. They accidentally select Concord, North Carolina, which is notably not New Hampshire, but they click it anyway. They successfully connect. They keep going, drag and drop the cookies into the cookie section. So what they've done so far is click like 3 things, and they're dragging and dropping the cookie file into the anti-detect browser. They launch it. They visit youtube.com just to show off, and boom, it works. And it's that simple. There was no click. There was no login. There was no nothing. All they did was drag and drop the cookie file into the browser, configure a few things, configure the location completely incorrectly. The reason they do the location is so that they it looks like the device is connecting from a coffee shop down the street from the person's house instead of a whole different, country or states away. But they did that wrong in it, and it still worked, which is terrifying. Now, most cookie takeover is fully automated. John covered this in a recent video for Creds and cookies. Things like Open Bullet, Silver Bullet, BL tools. These are tools that have largely automated testing stolen things, stolen cookies, stolen creds. And then MFA is also not, they can bypass MFA with cookies, but if you use TOTP-based MFA, horrifyingly enough, stealers also steal the config of most browser extensions that the user has installed. Usually they're looking for crypto stuff, but if you look in the list of browser extensions from any old stealer malware family, you're going to see a couple TOTP browser extensions too. And all they have to do is steal the config here, which contains the secret key, the number of digits, and the token period. And if they plug this into any website or Python script or whatever that's a TOTP generator, this is a victim's authentication on their actual device, which the config has now been stolen. This is a random website where you can plug in TOTP configs. And then this is the TOTP code that the bad guy generated using the stolen config, which you can see matches the victim machine exactly. So stealing this TOTP config from a stealer, which which most families do, is also a way to bypass MFA, unfortunately. And the kinds of apps that we've seen extortion groups target in the last year are things that have some kind of OAuth token that can be used to hop around to different apps. Because an OAuth token typically is issued to a user and can be used to access any app that they're federated to see. Whatever identity suite they're using has federated them to access. So you use Okta and it gets you into Dropbox and GitHub and whatever. So you log in through your IDP once and you're logged into all of your work accounts at the same time. These are the kinds of tokens that they go after. That one token that's going to get them into everything else, because they typically have very, very broad scopes. Now, they're often doing, they're finding these things in stealer logs, but also very prominently this year, a lot of very, kind of classic social engineering, which is, getting someone to install a malicious app that's going to steal OAuth tokens, or, convincing someone to visit a web page or download something that's going to steal existing OAuth tokens and send it to them in the moment. And then also some fancier supply chain attacks happened. But a lot of it is social engineering and stealer logs. And then even when it's not a stealer log, you go into the stealer log and see a super unique, you can make yourself seem a lot more credible as a cyber criminal when you're calling help desk by using information found in the stealer log, like oddly specific corporate links, which by the fact that these same groups are typically using stealer logs in addition to social engineering, we suspect they're cross-pollinating information from both. Now, this is an example of the technique used in one of the larger, more recent campaigns, which, what we're looking at here is someone using a Telegram bot that is making calls for them over Google Voice with a pre-built script. This is a bot called Big Hit a Bot.
Are you able to full screen the video, Nick?
I can, yes.
Sorry, I'm blind. I wear glasses.
I wish I could zoom in even more. So they have a config they upload to this, and it dials. Maybe you can hear the audio. I doubt it, but so he's asking for the status. He's waiting for it to dial, and boom,
Hello.
It dials.
This is an automated call from Google Mail. We have detected an unusual amount of login attempts located in Ashburn, Virginia. If this wasn't you, please press 1 on the keypad. If this was you, thank you for confirming. A Google assistant will contact you shortly.
So now, like, they can run a significant amount of these calls at the same time. But once someone enters one on their keypad, it shoots it back to the Telegram channel that the person is using to control their dialing bots. Yeah, the voice did sound kind of cursed. It sends back the code and says, hey, this worked. This phone number called and they pressed 1. So they've confirmed they own the account. Now you can call them back and you've got a much better chance of going well than randomly calling these numbers yourself. So this is how they automate these things. And yes, these are, you'll actually notice Coinbase recovery is written here, CB hackering is written here. These are super popular. I mean, the Coinbase attacks, but the same bots are used in all kinds of different phishing campaigns. Oh, good question from Orangutan Tortoise. How often are OETP generators as extensions found in the wild? Unless a cavalier allowing sketchy extensions, that's curious. Yeah, so like they're not, I would say they're super uncommon for corporate, like as a corporate multi-factor source, but people, just regular people for a shocking amount of apps in the wild do use OTP. And it's not like, again, for corporate apps, people have password manager, based code generation or app-based code generation for like a Duo or any one of the popular authenticator apps that are much, much safer than OTP browser extension. But you do see it, just not for work things. But there are a lot of people who have no interest in corporate compromises. They're just like taking over Netflix accounts and streaming accounts and like premium accounts on services and just kind of reselling them. And yes, in the crypto context, definitely like people using sketchy crypto services that take OTP and finding those. A lot of people who actually end up downloading these stealer logs are looking for crypto things. It's very evident by the data that's included with the logs, but not all of them. There are obviously many people using stealer logs for much more sophisticated stuff. Now, topic for the roundup of the year. A ton of people went to jail. A ton of interesting things happened. The thing that I found particularly interesting this year was an increase in people, though you'll see these attacks called ransomware in the wild, an increase in people getting extorted rather than classically encrypted with ransomware. So there are several prominent groups in the last year who made most of their money loading data from people's environments and listing it on a data leak site and saying, we'll release it if you don't pay us. They got access to an environment or just a SaaS and downloaded things like using the export function of the SaaS tool. But the interesting thing is they didn't do much else. They didn't go lock down a bunch of machines. They're not ransomware affiliates. Their access can be cut off and it doesn't matter. They stole data and they're just trying to extort you for the data. Usually that's something in the past, and still ransomware groups did. They would extort you for the data and have your systems locked down, which is, a double extortion situation. But now the single extortion that's happening is becoming increasingly popular. It is so damn easy for them to do. Some of the most successful campaigns, like the Snowflake one, for example, literally just meant with valid credentials, logging into someone's Snowflake tenant, finding the export button, downloading all the data, and then emailing them and saying, hey, we stole all your data from your Snowflake tenant. Please pay us or we're going to put it out. And that's how it worked. There's no hacking. There's logging in that. There's no real hacking. There's no scripting. There's no knowledge of cybersecurity. There's no knowing how to bypass anything. There's no need to understand how an environment works in any way. You just need to log into a SaaS app. Maybe a decade ago, the data that now lives in Snowflake was on-prem in some database server locked away behind a VPN. Would have been many more steps and much more expertise to get to. Now that same exact data lives in a SaaS app, and all you need is a valid set of creds, and if the creds don't work, a valid cookie to get in there. So it's changed the game a little bit. Now, some of these groups, Crimson Collective is an interesting one, a very recent one, who already has several prominent victims that they've claimed: Red Hat, Nintendo, Claro Columbia, and their whole operation is exfiltrating content from S3 and EC2. So they steal things out of companies' S3 buckets and then find ways to get into other S3 buckets at other AWS environments to go into other S3 buckets and exfil the data, and then they send a extortion email. Now, what's interesting is Shiny Hunters, who's responsible for many, people use the Shiny Hunters name when extorting people all the time. It's often not super clear if they're actually a part of the, com subculture or are really actually affiliated with like the people who own the Shiny Hunters accounts on forums in any way. But nonetheless, they use the name. In the PowerSchool hack, they used the name. In the Snowflake campaign, they did. In the Salesforce campaign, earlier one, they did. In several bucket jacking campaigns, which is what I have affectionately call these kinds of things when you try and take over AWS environments to steal data from the buckets. And this ransom note we're seeing here is from the same thing, from them doing exactly what Crimson Collective is doing now and stealing data from S3. Now, we've also seen them log in via InfoStealer. The PowerSchool hack was from that. The Snowflake campaign was from that. But this bucket jacking thing is a little different, but it looks exactly the same, very, very similar to what Crimson Collective is doing, despite them being different groups. So they find AWS keys exposed somewhere. Their code didn't work in some ways, which Palo Alto called out, which was very funny. They failed to retrieve IAM users. They viewed the names of all the S3 buckets that the access key they found can get into. Again, failed to retrieve a list of IAM users. The name of all the buckets, deleted a section of the buckets after exfiltrating them. So they stole a bunch of the bucket. This is like an interesting take on ransoming. They didn't encrypt the buckets at rest, which, by the way, there are separate campaigns that actually encrypted the buckets at rest, not affiliated with this crew. But they deleted buckets, left a bunch of buckets, and said, if you want your data back, you're going to have to reach out to us. And then they created new buckets with their names just to hopefully draw attention to it. Apparently, some of these just went completely unnoticed by the companies they'd hit for a very long time, because a lot of buckets are just kind of cold. Like their contents aren't being retrieved a lot, and no one's checking for new buckets being made in any serious volume, if they're just making a handful. So it is kind of funny, kind of tragic that a lot of people just didn't notice this attack happened despite it infecting so many environments. Another extortion group, again, a super recent one, is Coinbase Cartel, who apparently, at least research suggests they're also using stolen creds to get in where they're getting in. Seva Logistics, NTT Data, AdScale, they've already got a list of victims, and they've already got a DLS up. So again, another group that does not seem to be encrypting anything, but only stealing data from an environment and posting it online. And then obviously, most recently, SLSH, but we've talked enough about them and all of their things. So an interesting landscape, now more so than before, defined by extortion. Not to say ransomware is not still very prominent, but extortion is obviously becoming noticed by a lot of the younger, up and coming crews and collectives of cyber criminals. Now, okay, for presentation content, that's it. That was wrapping up what we were supposed to get to last week. And now we can do the fun stuff. So I'd love to take questions from the audience for John and myself. Mostly John, obviously. It's rare that you get this one-on-one time with him. So please ask away. And I also have questions for John that I will sprinkle in that are kind of like cybercrime philosophy. Like what is going on and where are we headed? So if anyone has questions, please start dropping them in there, and I will also ask away while you think of them. So
it's a strange arrangement of words. Cybercrime philosophy. The code of conduct.
I think it's a space that needs more love from academia. Cybercrime philosophy. What is the philosophy of cyber criminals? Typically, it's not a very deep philosophy, usually financially motivated. When tracking threat actors, what's a great tool or framework to track their TTPs, events, etc.? I mean, John, you answer that. Otherwise, I'm going to this question is asking me to shill for Flare.
Yeah,
very good question, Ian.
That
you can use potentially aren't paid.
No, I mean, the knee-jerk reaction that I know a lot of folks will throw out is like Maltego, because that's something you could probably get up and running a little bit quick and easy. I think, is Maltego still free and open source?
There is a community version.
Yeah. I think you have been falling in love with, and also kind of got me caught the bug with Predictograph, which is incredible. Yes. That is like a huge mind map, custom flexibility, customization of what might be doing what, and that's probably a little bit more to like the individual, to the person, to the people behind a threat actor group or cluster. But if you're looking at their TTPs and their events, those you could very well be tracking a MITRE attack framework, use something like Feedly to see, and any of the new reports that are out the door, of course, Flare. Yeah, Predictograph is a huge one that I would recommend if you're getting to like the individual level, or if you like that canvas to be able to connect the dots, draw and drag, and work with the nodes. I think there's a price tag on that one, but it's well worth it if you know that that's what you want to do.
Yeah, and they do let you make free graphs on Predictograph. So cool. Yes, it is paid, but there's a community edition. You can make free graphs, you can make a Predicta search account. And we also have a cool integration with Predictograph. So you can pull in like leaked creds from emails into your graphs automatically and a bunch of other cool things. So yeah, we're big fans.
That's incredible.
I'm a big fan. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I like it. Okay, can both of you speak to why there's such a gap in security across the SaaS/shared responsibility model? It feels like as things shifted from on-prem to cloud and SaaS, security fell by the wayside. And I just want to know if anyone has taken has any takes on that. Very good question. John, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah,
first?
I can get the ball rolling if that's okay, because I don't know how you'll approach it versus how I would. But I feel like the delta when you're talking about on-premise and cloud, SaaS, whatever, amorphous void, is that like it is then you who is responsible and you have to be in control of everything and you have to manage and monitor and audit and do literally everything when it's on-prem. But SaaS, you're just giving it to someone else. You're saying it's your problem now. And they manage it for you. Hopefully, that's kind of what the whole premise and promise is supposed to be. And how well they manage it for you is no longer up to you. Like the ball is not in your court. You gave it to them. So there's convenience with that. There is security if they're doing it right, but then it's a matter of, are they doing it right? That's where I think where you get into a lot of the like vendor accountability. That's when you start like, hey, can I see your quarterly pen test reports? Do I know you're doing quality assurance? Are you actually monitoring and enforcing all of these security recommendations? Do we have multi-factor everywhere, blah, 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 YubiKey, et cetera, et cetera? I know that's a lot of question marks, but I feel like that's the problem, is because if we are going to just blindly trust to whatever that managed SaaS solution is, you do still kind of want to know, how's the sausage made to a certain extent?
I agree. I think the color I would add is that maybe it was easier in the past when there was the shared responsibility model didn't exist before, in the sense that like you were deploying this database locally and you weren't necessarily locking down the database itself, but you were locking down everything around it. You were making the pipe that people were accessing the database at your company through. So you like, and you were probably using 3 open source projects to make that happen, or like things native to whatever your network tools were. So now that people go through the internet to get to the same thing or to get to the same data, it's like a reimagining of maybe it wasn't, you didn't think of how much your database product had to be locked down because you were like, listen, we're monitoring every freaking event on that thing. Everything to any log file is getting shipped to the SIM. We're only expecting these 5 executables to ever even run on the thing. So everything else, we're having an alert if anything runs there. These are the service accounts that should even be pinging the database from other products. Like you could very easily write detection rules for anything fishy going on under the database. That's just not really the case anymore. And people like defenders have still defend the endpoint, I think, with great diligence, with detection content, with very good EDRs, with all of this stuff. And the same love, these things take time. Like the same love is now being given to SaaS tools, but it's a slower evolution. Like once a tool is through the third-party risk assessment, I don't think a lot of people think quite as deeply about locking it down as they do locking down their endpoints. As things evolve, people who admin them are outside of the security function. Yeah, totally. They are. You want security to be involved in the procurement, at least, like a notification that you bought this tool so that they can get around to securing it. But I mean, that's a big problem in its own. Like most orgs have a huge backlog of that kind of stuff. Yeah, Project Zero, we probably could. We could probably do this question alone for hours. Do you see RAMP taking over exploit or XSS? Oh man, I don't know. In the near future, I think things will probably not change materially. But why do you ask? Do you think? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. If there's a big op endgame announcement, then things could certainly change immediately. But I don't know. I don't have a confident answer. If Oleg was here, I'm sure he would. Oleg is our Russia cybercrime guy. He'd give you a big essay about RAMP. But I haven't like consumed any information that would suggest that. I should have told Oleg to be here, man. But good question.
Maybe I can ask a question for you, or if anything, just to kind of get us thinking. And maybe we talked about this a little bit, so I don't know if I'm just talking hot air, sorry. But why are there so many now different either forums or factions? Or has the cybercrime ecosystem ever actually successfully centralized to one? But then I know you're just going to get, the high school cliques and whatever stupid cybercrime crap to just splinter and faction as they inevitably do. And yeah, I guess kind of cockroaches thing, you cut the head off the hierarchy and there are more, blah, blah, blah.
The early days of cybercrime were the more unified. Like there were, back the days of, what was that forum called? What was like it was like the OG, it was like before, way before raid forums. Not even Darkcode. The one was like after Darkcode. Someone's going to remember it. But the cybercrime world was a lot smaller back in the day. It was like a few people stealing credit cards and sharing them with each other. And that was probably the most organized in terms of location that the world of cybercrime maybe ever was. And then honestly, like 2024 breach forums was very, very tight-knit. Every story that made the news, it felt like, for like a 6-month period, were from one of the main characters on breach forums. Of really, there were a few cliques that were were doing all of the data leaking, posting data leaks, and very few of them were for sale. Like, it was a lot of free stuff. That was the most like I think one of the more organized eras. But I mean, what VXDB said is, yes, Shadow Crew. Thank you, VX. I was just about to, I don't know, I was going to Google search cybercrime mindlessly and see what came up. But yes, absolutely, Shadow Crew. Thank you. But I mean, VX is right. When you cut the head off the Hydra, it grows more. This happens every time a big forum falls. Like, look at when the most recent, or like the second most recent breach forums fall, when there were like 25 clones. It was chaos, and there were prominent breach forums members who were making clones and then selling the domains and then saying that their clone was fake and it wasn't actually them, even though like there was a ridiculous amount of evidence that it was them. There were scams left and right. It was a very chaotic era. So, you know, it's scatterbrained right now. I think it'll probably, like, the world of cybercrime will eventually find its way back to a prominent, at least the English-speaking world of cybercrime will eventually find its way back to a prominent location. But for now, it's spread between many channels and groups on Telegram, which is just much more chaotic than in years past. I know this is a noob question, but I just wanted to ask you guys, what's your advice to a newbie threat intel analyst? How can newbies be better analysts other than MITRE mapping, tracking using a tip? What mindset should we instill for newbies to be better analysts? Very fun question. I think for a new threat intel analyst, the interesting, like, people, you know, we sometimes open research positions at Flare, and generally people who have writing samples always stick out. Like, maybe they put things on a blog, or maybe they just write privately and share a writing sample with us. But like, the act of VXDB obviously has an amazing blog that you all should read. The act of organizing things into a report, even if it's not a part of your job, is very helpful for wrapping your head around the narrative of what's going on in the world of cybercrime. Because sometimes you'll see a major attack going on, you'll see some quote from some threat actor, or you'll see something happen on Telegram, and you'll have a bit of the story and enough to share, but like, the deeper you go, the more context you get, and you might have to read 3 reports and go, you know, into 4 different tools to find all of the posts from all the threat actors. But the history of the cyber criminals involved, their personal relationships, the things they've done before, the crews they've been a member of before, these things all help you wrap your head around what's going on. So I think trying to write reports with like a nice exec summary, a nice bluff bottom line up front before it, is great practice for, you know, shaping the narrative around a cybercrime event that will help you prepare things for, as you get more senior in your threat intel career, you'll have to share these things with different audiences. So it'll help you kind of get perspective on, as you're writing a report, who would really care about this? Is it our SOC manager? Is it one of the GRC folks? Is it someone in finance? Like, who's the audience? These are very good things to consume. And then what John just shared is awesome. These are like handouts and resources from people who do this kind of stuff for a living, which are great. So consuming from analysts that you admire and that you'd like to make content like theirs, or you'd like to, you know, do the job that they do as your day job. These are the kinds of things that I recommend. You know, kind of generic advice, but it's real. And find a corner that you're very interested in, because if you're really interested in whatever it is you're researching, you're going to have a really awesome time. You're going to be really excited to wake up for work the next day and see who posted what. So I highly recommend it. Mitch asked, as cloud dominance reduces the number of traditional attack paths, are we inevitably pushing towards adversaries targeting people physically instead of systems? Does the next evolution of this trend involve coercion or threats against individuals to force access? I think it's a good question. Basically, you're saying there's one path now to get to access, and it's like through this guy's creds or a stolen session, you know, or help desk. It's like a handful of very generic access paths. There's not 15 routes in through like any number of internal privesk and pivoting and things that, you know, maybe happened in the past. I think probably not physically yet, but we have already seen an increase in actual physical attacks targeting prominent people in the world of crypto specifically. So it has the focus on the individual because they hold the keys to the kingdom more so than they did before. It's harder to pivot into the thing you want. You have to get the keys from someone, either from their device, if you can get it, or if not, from them by tricking them or by any number of things. So I think we will probably see the same trend of violence in the crypto world, maybe that we have so far. But I haven't seen this spill into corporate cybersecurity yet, like people being extorted as individuals. I've seen offers go to people, like people offer to pay insiders for access, but I haven't seen threats against insider yet. But now, Mitch, you're giving people ideas, man. But it's a really good question. My question for John, and I have an answer too, and I bet people in the chat have answers too, so please chime in, is do you think the number of arrests this year, basically the question is, what does it mean? A lot more people went to jail this year. Like there was a Stealer log sting that took down tons of domains, like 30 some odd people were arrested. In all of the like young extortion groups, there were 27 arrests in the last like year and some change. Do we think this is law enforcement making a ton of progress? Or is the iceberg getting larger and they're still cutting the tip off? But like, since it's getting larger, the tip is getting larger too. But are there more cyber criminals? Is it getting easier for people to do cybercrime? Is this real progress? Is it just the tip of the iceberg or nuanced? You know, is it maybe a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B? John, you first.
That became a very big question, Nick. You threw in a lot of extra sub questions in there.
Big question is this solid progress that means we're cracking down on cybercrime, or does this just mean there's more cybercrime?
I don't know if I'm like glass half full, rosy glasses, or too much of an optimist or whatever, but like, no, genuinely, I do think it is good. It is good forward motion. It is progress. I think law enforcement doing more crackdowns, more takedowns, more seizures, more arrests, like that, I think for me is not a, there's some bigger baddie around the corner, or there's going to be more that we find as we open up Pandora's box. I think it's just that we're getting better at it. We're good at it. And it's not by any means some like, political thing, but I think for a while, for a little bit of time, we had like good players on the field. And at least that did set a precedent for the continued players on the team now to keep things going in a good direction. I don't know if it's a good direction yet, but I know it's a direction, and I think that's a heck of a lot better than no movement at all. But I think when we are putting it in the limelight, screaming and shouting about like, look at these arrests, look at the damage that we're doing, and that's a good thing. It's not like chest thumpy, but it's really genuinely to show, yeah, if you're some stupid 16-year-old, 17-year-old kiddo and doing the cybercrime stuff, you're gonna be caught and you're gonna be arrested and you're gonna have your life ruined and taken away from you because of the stupid things that you did. So I don't think we're emboldening or glorifying whatever when we have an arrests, and I think that the number of arrests is a good thing, and I think we are fighting the fight the right way. But that's me. Sorry, I'm waxing poetic. I don't know. What do you think, Nick?
That is a perfect philosophical answer to a very philosophical question. And I agree. My answer is relatively simple, which is one, yes, this is real progress, and progress should be celebrated because the amount of damage cyber criminals have been able to do in the last 3-4 years is like stunning. So crackdowns on it are meaningful. There was a lot of time where no serious arrests happened. Like there were big ones in 2023 and the beginning of 2024, but like now it's a lot higher than it used to be. Law enforcement is paying more attention, and that's good. And I also think, I also think the iceberg is getting larger. I think the barriers to entry for cybercrime have gotten lower. I think there's a lot of literature that suggests this may be an effect of COVID, the lockdowns, people staying home a lot more, but there is a more technical group of young people online who some are channeling their passions into, stuff like this, researching about the things that are happening and hoping to be on the right side of it. But a lot of them who, maybe don't have the best judgment or role models or who knows what. That's not my question to answer, but I think there are more cyber criminals now because cybercrime has simply become easier. The data has become easier to find. The companies have become easier to extort. This is something that I do suspect will change over the years, but it's the era that we're in now. That's my philosophical answer to an also philosophical question that I asked. There's a couple more questions I should ask, but I'm not. Okay, you know what? This is another philosophical question for you, John, which is you have hacked potentially more things than anyone. You've hacked many things, not as a bad guy. You've documented it on your YouTube channel. You've taught people how to be defenders. And the demos you were giving, years ago on techniques for access have maybe changed a little. Like you've seen a lot of data that we have. You've seen Stealer logs. You've seen videos. You know how easy Stealer logs have made the world of cybercrime, like just the proliferation of creds and cookies alone. Do you think we've gone wrong somewhere in authentication? Should we have sped up the elimination of passwords quicker now that creds are everywhere and they're being stuffed more than they were before, which is crazy because it's easier to stop the stuffing now, but they're still stuffing more. They're succeeding more. Cred-based and cookie-based attacks are at a higher success rate than they were before, mostly because they're at a much higher volume than they were before. But did we go wrong somewhere? Should we have gone somewhere faster? And what do you think? What do you think of when I ask you that question? Is the world of auth okay?
I think the current landscape that we're in, right? Oh, whatever cheesy landscape, big fluffy term, is just the fact that that is the way things work for HTTP and making connections and working with the internet. Like, that's just the way that it is. That's just how it has been. Passwords were the way. Cookies are how you store that, a state session-wise or a connection in that regard. And that's just how it's been. And that's, I think, now what has enabled how it's become so commoditized to have Stealer logs and password spraying and all the cookie stuff falling around and about. But I don't think to say, okay, we missed the boat or we jumped the shark or we were wrong in that. However, I do have another part of me that's saying like, look, we're a little bit smarter now and we do know authentication kind of comes from like 3 different pedestals or podiums, right? You've got something you know, traditionally your password, something that you have that's supposed to be your multi-factor authentication like your phone, your pullout, and then something that you are, like your biometrics, your eye, retina scan, fingerprint, whatever, right? So if we got a little bit smarter and sharper with that earlier, yeah, okay, cool. We probably, maybe, I don't know, maybe could have prevented a whole lot of the stuff that we're in right now. If we had mandated and gone away with, okay, here's this holistic picture of how you prove your identity and who you are, what you say you are. Maybe we just started with one. We used the password and that's how we got to where we are right now. But now I think, yeah, okay, are we going to kill passwords? Do we ever replace it? Is it like cash? It's currency. It's never going to die. We just have to. I tend to think, yeah, it's never really going to die. But if we could try to get to that passwordless world or those FIDO keys or something that has a little bit more bolstering in the layers of Swiss cheese for defense in depth, that's good. That would be good. So I guess we are really, to a certain extent, playing catch up. I don't know if I answered your question or if I just drove all over the map.
You actually did, believe it or not. And it was a very compelling rant. I loved it, and I really appreciated you being on here today. We are actually at time. So that is it, my friends. The next thing we're doing is Flare, I think we posted the link in here already, but an Entra ID, like an AD and Entra ID security training. Again, these are not like, it's a training by Flare, but it's not of Flare. So there's not much of the tool in the training. If you protect Active Directory or Entra, then these are interesting attacks for you to understand and interesting defense techniques for you to understand. So thank you again, everyone. You were such a fun chat, such good questions, which I had a lot of fun answering. I hope you did too, John. And we will see you again on the next thing.